Hello everybody and welcome to the RuneScape weekly live stream. I'm JD, your host for today, and I'm joined on the sofas by Mod Mick, sporting a lovely Christmas jumper.
Who's drab?
No drab today, no drab today. And I'm also joined by Mod Kelvin, who I think it might be your first time on the stream for a long time.
Yep.
So Kelvin is our Director of Player Experience, and Mod Mick is our Senior Product Manager. I've got that right, haven't I?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So I also noticed that Shawnee is in the chat today, so I hope I do you proud, mate.
Shawnee.
This is a shout out for you. So this stream has been kind of enigmatically titled Duty of Care, and that's kind of done a little bit deliberately because we wanted to try and address something that actually we find, that we want to take really seriously, and that is the phrase duty of care. And I wonder if, by means of introduction, Kelvin, if you could kind of perhaps go through with us what you define as duty of care to our player base, because that's something that's kind of well within your remit.
Yeah, I think duty of care is really, I suppose, kind of how we want to engage with kind of our players around certain areas that maybe sit outside of gameplay in some aspects, but also actually from kind of Matt's perspective, a real kind of core part of gameplay. So this can be everything from how we kind of treat safeguarding our players, to how we deal with people who are kind of spending money in game, to actually kind of the mechanics of gameplay itself.
Yeah, I think Mod and I spoke about it a little bit in the last stream, and we said we'd come back with some of the answers to some of the other questions that we didn't tackle before. So I think hopefully we've got an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and just a quick side note, Mod Warden unfortunately has lost his voice over the course of the day. So yeah, I know, very convenient, isn't it? But he's not able to be on the live stream today. He sends his apologies, but
better soon.
We wish him all the best. So we've kind of got an idea of what duty of care is, and I know obviously this has kind of come really to the fore as a result of the DCMS report that was published in October, I believe.
September,
sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Already not got my facts right. September. But I don't know if perhaps by way of offering context for this, if you could kind of perhaps go over the actual process of how we became involved with the report and what the kind of process was when we were actually within London and Westminster.
Okay, yeah, so basically we kind of got an email from the, and DCMS stands for Department of Culture, Media and Sport, from the Select Committee. So that's a group of members of Parliament, similar to a kind of Senate committee in the States. And they asked us to give evidence to an inquiry that they were running, which was into immersive technologies. They wanted to look at social media, they wanted to look at video games, and ask a whole range of kind of industry experts a kind of series of questions. So we got the email. They asked us to come along and give our thoughts for a couple of hours. We volunteered straight away. There was kind of no question on our part, and I think we were quite pleased to be asked. As games is kind of our life.
Were we kind of obligated to do it, or was it something that was actually we were kind of said you must kind of come by crook or by hook or by crook, or was it something?
No, not at all. We were invited and we accepted. Simple as that.
Okay, cool. And obviously we went there and we said our piece, and I believe that is somewhere on the government website if you want to watch that. But obviously when the report was published, there was a mention of Jagex specifically within that report. And I think one of the first things that, as part of this stream, that's quite important to do is actually identify what that mention was about, and if we can perhaps give, again, a little bit more clarity on why perhaps we were kind of singled out specifically.
Yeah, so I think there was a kind of press release that kind of accompanied the report, and in that they referenced the £50,000 claimed spend from an adult player. I think that was then picked up by the media that were writing about it, and I mean other games companies were mentioned in the report, but frustratingly for us, it was kind of that got the headlines, not some of the other kind of good stuff that was in there, such as us being singled out for best practice for things like our safeguarding. Yeah,
I mean, let's address the elephant in the room, the £50,000, $60,000, whichever media corporation decided to run with it. So that testimony from that individual, has that been resolved? Has that kind of been worked out our end?
I suppose it depends kind of what you mean by resolve. So what kind of happened in the report was an anonymous member of the public submitted a report talking about their 25-year-old son who had allegedly accumulated £50,000 worth of debt. We talked about this in the committee, and actually one of the members of Parliament that talked to us about that quoted a figure of £17,000 worth of debt, and said they had bank statements provided to them. We haven't seen any of that stuff. And actually, we've not been able to kind of corroborate that spend with kind of what we've got in terms of our account details and spend details for players.
This is over a long period of time as well.
Yes. Yes. So we've not been approached by the player ourselves, and there was some legislation, I don't know if you're aware, called GDPR across Europe, which is all about data privacy and ownership. And what that actually kind of means for us is we can only talk to the account owner about the specific details of an account. And to our knowledge, that player has not contacted us to talk to us about that at all. And we actually kind of need that from a legal perspective to be able to kind of have a conversation around it.
Yeah.
But we understand that we're talking about a lot of money here. And one of the things that one of the members of Parliament kind of said to me in the committee, which did kind of strike a chord, was he was asking me, and it was kind of grilling me, I think, to be honest.
Well, I was going to say, I'm not quite Paxman, unfortunately. But
it was kind of grilling me about, kind of have we looked at kind of best practice in kind of various industries around players with kind of high spend, etc. And at that stage we hadn't. But actually, we've had a look at that, and part of what we're going to kind of talk to you about in a little bit is some of the initiatives that we're going to put into games, into our kind of support procedures and all the rest of it. To specifically combat that and address some of those questions that we were asked.
Yeah, and obviously that report isn't something that is jurisdiction at this stage. It's a recommendation that's been sent to the Department of trying to get the DCMS committee.
Yeah.
And then I would imagine, given that we are 2 or 3 days away from a general election, we're probably not going to get a response to that straight away. So
so they make recommendations to government. It's up to government to decide whether they want to accept them or not. Everything's on pause at the minute, like you say, because of the general election. We expect government to respond at some point in the new year. But from our perspective, we don't want to wait for that. We've been a part of this. We've had lots of kind of conversations ourselves, and actually a lot of what we want to talk to you about here is what we are doing ourselves that we think is the right thing to do.
Yeah, and that's been going on for a while. So some of the stuff that came up out of that, we've either been thinking about, we're already addressing. Some of the stuff that's happened in the game recently, we'll talk about a bit more. So these are all things we're either doing or we want to do. So yeah.
I mean, we'll touch on Yak Track in a little bit, but say that was something that was in the works, I would imagine, a long time before.
I think I said we started working on that back in June. I think.
Yeah. So I mean, I think what's important to note throughout this stream is what we're talking about. Some of this stuff has been implemented now. Some of this stuff is stuff that we would like to be doing. And I think there is a lot of experimentation that needs to happen.
Yes.
And so we'd love to get everything right straight away, but I think we're going to be in a place where we are experimenting with various different initiatives over the course of the next few months. So the aim for this stream is to try and go through some of those initiatives, get your feedback, start the dialogue with you guys, the players, find out if there's something that you think would work for us, and try and take that on board as well. Okay, so we've kind of given the context. Kelvin, what is the strategy? What are we looking to do with this moving forward?
Okay, I suppose the aim of it is to make sure that we're creating the best possible gaming environment for our players, right? That's kind of what we're driven by. We're accountable to you, our community, on that. So it's important that we do that. And for us, there's kind of 3 sort of key areas of this. The first is around freedom of choice. The second is around providing that safe gaming environment for players, and then it's about satisfying engagement for all of our players as well. And I think we'd like to just spend some time to explain in a bit more detail what we kind of mean by each of those 3 things.
And I know it's kind of a corporate way of approaching it, but those are kind of the 3 pillars of how we're approaching this. So I'm coming into this not within this kind of working group. I'm obviously somebody who can hopefully talk to the players and get the player input. But I know that there is a working group within Jagex as well, which straddles a lot of different departments and a lot of different senior members of staff as well.
Completely. So yeah, we've got exec producers from every product, both that's live and in production as well. We have our kind of communications experts, community management. We have representatives from our kind of tech teams as well, all kind of working together to build this out into some sort of meaningful initiatives that will hopefully impact positively on RuneScape and future products as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, it is important at this point to note that whilst we are streaming, we're talking about RuneScape today, a lot of these initiatives will go across all of Jagex titles moving forward as well. Okay, so let's talk about freedom of choice to kick off with. So what, I suppose, do we define as freedom of choice? What does that entail for both Jagex but also as a player?
Well, I suppose the big thing about RuneScape is it's about freedom of choice. It's this open environment. You can play the game kind of how you want, and you can make informed decisions. And really, that's kind of, I suppose, what this kind of pillar is about, is providing information for players to be able to make informed decisions day to day about kind of what they want to do and how they want to interact with RuneScape and play our games. Okay,
so obviously within that, there are a few kind of, I suppose, subcategories of how we can approach that. So I would say the first probably is around time spent in game. The other is around, I suppose, spend.
Yes.
And then the third is around sort of game content. So maybe, perhaps it's best to break it down into those three areas. In terms of the time spent in game, obviously what we want to try and do is encourage healthy gaming habits. What are we doing to make sure that that is taken into account?
Okay. So I mean, I know Rod Mike is going to talk about kind of bonus XP and the changes that we kind of made to that, and that kind of is part of this and kind of fits into it. But the other thing that we put in about a month ago or so ago now was just a small kind of in-game prompt. So people have been playing for a while, you get a kind of little message in the chat window in a different colour. It says, "Hi, you've been playing for a while. You might want to take a break from your screen." People might not realise, you know, they're kind of really engrossed in the game and enjoying it. And you know, we all know it's a kind of good practice. We do it here in the office. Take a little break, go out and kind of have a walk, kind of outside or whatever, stretch your legs, and just take a break. You know, it's all part of kind of healthy play.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that actually you might, if perhaps if you're not necessarily paying attention, you might miss it. Is there a reason why we've done it in that particular way, that it's a chatbot message? Obviously, it's in a different colour to try and highlight it, but is there a reason why it's perhaps not?
I think some people asked why we weren't using it in like pop-ups where we might show offers or things like that, but those things we tend to do just at login. So rather than something that could pop up at any time. So if you're in the middle of a fight or a boss encounter or something like that, you don't want something getting in the way. So we thought that'd be the best place to sort of kind of try that out.
Yeah, again, you know, it's not about being a nanny state, right? It's not about telling people kind of how to play. It's about providing information, and providing that information in the most unobtrusive way possible. Okay. And I think that's what we've done.
Cool. And I mean, obviously, hopefully this should be obvious, but why is this important? Why is it important to try and break up sort of sessions at a screen and encourage this kind of more healthy way of playing the game?
Just a general kind of life advice, right?
If you read a book for 4 hours, you're going to get tired. So the same with anything, really.
Yeah, true.
Again, it's just about saying, you might want to kind of take a break, try something different for a little bit. Please come back. When you do, it'll still be there, kind of ready and waiting for you, and hopefully you're kind of refreshed and ready to enjoy your adventures.
Yeah, and we'll come back to this again when we start talking about, say, Double XP weekend. The extended Double XP weekend, I should say, a little bit later on. But I want to talk about spend next. Obviously, the primary call out from, say, the report is about spend, but there are also obviously obligations that we have as a company to try and ensure that players are protected. So what are we doing in order to make sure that from a financial perspective our players are being protected as much as possible? Okay,
so the first thing to say, again, based on kind of freedom of choice, is, you know, I do not know how much money someone has when they are kind of spending on RuneScape or on any kind of product whatsoever. However, what we have decided to do, and this was through kind of looking at things like kind of best practice, is when people do have kind of various sort of spending behaviour, is we want to reach out to them with a message, and that message says, look, we're aware that you've spent a fair amount kind of recently in RuneScape, and that we would like to make sure you're okay with that you're comfortable with those levels of spending, and if you're not, you can kind of contact us and then we can have a conversation around it. And there's various things that kind of people can do on that. For example, with the GDPR legislation, people can request deletion of their account, for example. So if they're not comfortable with it, then they can request that and we can sort that out straight away.
Okay, and do you say that there was an automated system whereby this was going to be more?
So we're starting this as a trial right now. The trial will start kind of before Christmas. We're going to start slow and then kind of build it up. We've been working with our analytics team to understand what those kind of triggers are, what we can kind of experiment with, and we do have a process that will give us a list, which then a member of our player support team then looks at that. We'll then reach out to them through that process, and then they'll be talking to a member of our support team throughout.
Okay, and is this about, say, how much somebody would spend, or is it about, say, an abnormal behaviour that might come out of sort of a player spending pattern, for instance?
Yeah, so there's a few things that we're looking at. One is, it might be kind of what some people might consider a high level of spend. It might be that someone all of a sudden starts kind of spending quite a lot more than they kind of did before. And we also want to look at things like playtime. So we're not kind of quite ready to do that yet. But again, if we've got someone that maybe is spending what could be considered an excessive amount of time in game, then again, we would like to kind of reach out to them. But we're going to start with the spend triggers, and then we will kind of continue and kind of iterate and move on and include playtime in that as well.
Okay, cool. And I know one of the things that we tend to get feedback from players on is I want to get support, I want to be able to contact support, but I don't necessarily know how to, or it's not necessarily obvious how to. I know that there are some plans in place to make that more. Yeah,
so I mean, in the message that we're sending out, there'll be a link to contact us directly. So that will make it as easy as possible for anyone to reply and be in direct then contact with the support team. Equally, we obviously have the support centre. I know there are various kind of self-help things in that. I know there is kind of feedback. It's really interesting, actually. We did a player survey recently, and I'll come on and talk about some of that in terms of sort of toxicity and behaviour in game, but also just to kind of segue a little bit into kind of players' attitudes around support. We're obviously kind of looking at that. We want to share some of those results with the community in January as well, and let you know what we're kind of thinking about. So we're aware of some of the frustrations that people have with some of the support that we have, but equally we're trying to kind of, certainly through this process, make it as easy as possible for players to be able to contact us.
Yeah, and you mentioned about payment restrictions. What is the current what are we currently able to do for players if they were to come to us and say, I want to stop spending on my account? What are we currently able to do?
Yeah, so I mean, one is we can obviously remove that account, or alternatively, we can block credit card payments as well as kind of part of that process. But I think it's more just about really trying to reach out, make sure someone is kind of comfortable with that spending. If they're not, then we have a conversation, a dialogue with that player, and that's really the important thing on this, I think. And
I think that's why the trigger will be useful, just to let people know if things look unusual. Are you aware what's going on? It's simple as that.
Okay, and in terms of scaling that up, then what does that look like? So obviously at the moment we have got deletion and credit card payments that we can block. Is there a plan moving forward to build that up as well?
Yeah, so and this is quite a long way down the line and would require a significant amount of development work. But we are going to be looking at things like, do people want to be able to set a spend limit for themselves that they're comfortable with, and then when they reach that cap, maybe they can kind of increase it, or maybe they kind of stop. And again, that's about providing that information. When we go back to that point of kind of freedom of choice, people can make informed decisions based on that information. If they're happy to carry on spending and they're comfortable with it, great. If they want to then stop at that point, they can then stop at that point. But I must say, that really is a significant amount of development time, and it's not going to happen soon, but it is there on our plans, and we would like to have that at some point in the future. And that's both for existing and any new products from Jagex as well.
Okay. Just quickly talking about sort of the deletion process. Obviously, that's quite an extreme outcome for somebody, if that were to be something that somebody would like to do, is that then reversible, or is it gone for good?
Deletion is gone for good. That's a real kind of core part of the GDPR legal process. So if players request a deletion of the account, we are required by law to remove that account, and it's unrecoverable. We can't find it. So yes, certainly. But in terms of, if people do want a kind of limit on spending, then we can kind of look at that and make some kind of changes to that. We'd take a kind of common sense view on it. If someone keeps contacting us every 5 minutes, asking us to turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, there'll come a point when we go, hang on a minute, we need to kind of stop that. Yeah. But that's a very extreme kind of circumstance and situation. But yeah, if you request deletion of your account, then it is gone for good. Cool.
Okay, so freedom of choice. That's I think that's everything on this. I'm just going to double check and see if there are any questions from the chat. I'm getting a little error message on the question. So guys, if there's anything, CM guys, if there are any questions in there, can you please put them back in there, and I'll come back to them a little bit later. So let's go on to the second part, which is
safe environment.
Safe environment. Sorry, I scrolled all the way to the bottom. Now I've scrolled all the way to the top again. So let's talk about safe environment. What do we feel? I mean, I've got my own opinion on this, but
go on then, JD. What's your opinion?
Mine probably goes outside of just say somebody feeling like they are being protected by. I suppose it is more being protected by the company as a whole, whether that straddles all kinds of things, whether it's that we've got their best interests at heart for monetary purposes, for their well-being, but also that we are protecting them, say, for instance, from trolls, and making sure that toxicity is at a minimum amongst the community.
Yeah.
And I feel like toxicity is something that obviously we can do a certain amount for. Obviously there's a certain amount that individuals need to help us with as well. But we can do quite a lot with regards to that to make the game a safer place as possible, particularly for under 18s as well.
Yeah, okay. So I think the broad point to kind of mention here is that we have around 1 million or so kind of players a month on RuneScape. That is a microcosm of society. Whatever goes on the internet, in society, we will also see that happening, albeit at a smaller scale, in RuneScape. So we need to kind of go into this with our eyes open, right? We know that there are terrorists on the internet. We know that there are people that cry for help in terms of kind of self-harm on the internet. We know there are people that threaten to commit real-world threats of violence on the internet. And in a very kind of small volume, but really important to us, we do see some of that in game. And and I've seen conversations on Reddit and on our kind of forums when our chat monitoring systems have triggered, and we've kind of identified something, and maybe we've kind of escalated to law enforcement to reach out and help and kind of support someone. So we actually have quite sophisticated chat monitoring systems in RuneScape, which generally are kind of acknowledged as kind of one of the best areas of practice within the industry. We certainly engage with a lot of our peers, and we know we do a lot more than most kind of on that. And we've been doing this for years. This isn't a kind of new thing. Safeguarding has always been a really, really important part of kind of what we do. So we issue warnings to people. We'll issue kind of bans. We'll reach out to people with help. And actually, over the years, we've cooperated with things like law enforcement, legal companies, and actually we work with the National Crimes Agency. We're part of the Gaming Roundtable. We help kind of drive the policy about kind of closer cooperation with law enforcement for those few times when something bad kind of does happen on the internet, and we all know it does.
Yeah. Do we have anything that would obviously manually checking chat logs all the time, I imagine is quite an undertaking for a team. Is there anything in game that would that is automated to perhaps help us deal with this issue?
Yeah. So I mean, behind kind of the scenes, we're monitoring all chat 24/7 for one, and we have a whole series of keyword phrases and issues that we both built up ourselves, and we also work with the Internet Watch Foundation kind of on that. So those will then trigger any potential concerning phrases in chat, and they are then manually reviewed by our support staff and community safety experts, and we take action kind of accordingly with that. The other thing that we've got is if there are players out there who all they're doing is disrupting other people's play continually, and they're reported by lots of players in a short space of time for being disruptive, we know through the analysis that we've done that those players, all they're going to do is disrupt kind of gameplay. So we then issue those players with a warning straight off. If they then persist and carry on, we take them out again, because we want people to have that enjoyable and safe gaming environment, and we found that's a really kind of effective way of taking out those players that all they want to do is disrupt other people's gameplay. Now we know we can kind of do more on that stuff, but it's not a bad kind of start in terms of.
No, as I say, I think it's a really important thing that perhaps doesn't get quite as much notice as perhaps it should really. One of the other things that I think is important to highlight at this point is, as I say, the kind of the I won't say zero tolerance policy, but quite a strict policy on this that kind of behaviour as well. Which again hopefully helps to safeguard multiple players on a regular basis. I want to talk about player-run games of chance, because I know that's something that when we talk about safeguarding players, that is again at the top of a lot of players' lists. What are we doing to, I suppose, better equip our players to perhaps not falling into traps of addictive behaviours or anything that might be detrimental to them?
Yeah, so again, going back over quite some time, and you know, we've been doing this kind of for years. We've worked with kind of content when we do identify kind of any sort of exploits or anything that's been kind of used in game for gambling. Then we work with content to make changes, and the flower game is kind of the perfect one that kind of jumps out as an example a good few years ago, where people were kind of betting on kind of random
flower appears,
on the random chances of a flower appearing and all the rest of it. So you know, we took that kind of out of game in conjunction with content. So we're always on the eye out for kind of things like that. I know we've got areas kind of like the dual arena, which is talked about kind of a lot, and it's something that we're looking at quite closely at the minute. And I think there's a lot of detail that we need to understand. We need to understand, you know, what motivates players to it, what do players enjoy about that. We wouldn't want to kind of necessarily remove anything that's you know going to cause any sort of detrimental impact on gameplay. But equally, we know it is a concern. It's been raised by the community, and it continues to be. So you know, as a result of that, we are looking extremely kind of closely on it. And when we kind of reach a decision on that, we'll obviously share that with the community and share our thinking on that.
Yeah, I saw a couple of people in the chat as well mention about San Casino as well, which I imagine falls into a similar bracket.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. So we talked about we've talked about dual arena, we've talked about player-run games of chance. Obviously, we do tend to find that perhaps toxicity within those areas of the game tends to be rife, perhaps more than other areas. What are we doing to try and to give those players more of a positive game experience who might be taking part in those activities and actually wanting to do perhaps what it's intended to be there for, which is actually something that's a bit of fun? Yeah,
so I mean, obviously, as I've kind of already mentioned, some of the stuff that we have around kind of chat monitoring, excuse me, and kind of the toxic repeater stuff. Obviously, what you need to understand in terms of toxic behaviour is that some things are acceptable to some players and some things aren't acceptable to others. Though there probably is a kind of middle ground of things that are unacceptable to everyone. And I think we're focused quite well on that. But the other stuff that's slightly kind of grey areas, we need to get a lot more information about. So I mentioned the survey that we sent out, and there were quite a lot of kind of detailed questions there about things like how often have you experienced or seen things like griefing or ragging or scamming or attempts to kind of hijack you. So we've got a real good kind of understanding of how often kind of players are seeing that type of behaviour, the impact that it's kind of having on their gameplay. And now it's us to kind of have a look at that and pick that apart and see, okay, what are the various initiatives that we can kind of come up with to try and tackle that. Now, you know, I'll be honest, we haven't got all the answers right now. That was part of the point of kind of reaching out, getting our kind of players' perspective and the player view on that stuff, so we can then sit down again as a kind of senior team and think, right, okay, how do we need to kind of tackle that as a business? And as we kind of get there, we will obviously kind of share that and iterate on that with our players.
Yeah, you mentioned the survey and you mentioned coming back to the players about it. Is that something that we've got planned for the near future to talk, but specifically about toxicity?
What we wanted to do was kind of share the results of the survey, and that's both kind of attitudes to player support as well as attitudes to toxicity. So we do want to kind of share that in January with our players, and then as we've been kind of engaging much more with the community on NTX on this live stream kind of now, and future ones kind of planned, we're going to talk to players a lot more about this stuff as we go.
Yeah, transparency is the way forward.
Yeah, good.
I'm going to talk about off-site third-party gambling and gold farming websites. We released something I think a couple of weeks ago now, which was a blog post around, or I think it was a forum post which we shared on social around taking down a couple of the gold farming websites. How damaging are they to sort of your regular player?
I mean, the potential for damage is huge. I mean, these are unregulated sites that are selling gold they've not got our permission to kind of do that. A lot of those sites are safe and secure. They ask you for a kind of password to kind of log in. There are database breaches, not our own, I might add. We've not kind of had that at all, but we know there are huge amounts of database breaches out there from these kind of third-party sites who aren't as conscientious about security as we are with our systems, and that means then people's accounts are vulnerable to potential kind of hijacking and all the rest of it. So you've kind of got that, and then secondly, these are sites where people are kind of running and selling kind of cheap programs and all the rest of it, and it's all a bit of a kind of downward spiral into kind of the bad side of the stuff that we don't want in game, and gold farming, real world trading, and that kind of black market in kind of virtual items. And that's something that not only kind of law enforcement keen to kind of stamp out. It was kind of referenced in the committee, and actually there's one thing we'd like to kind of sort of point out on there. There was a kind of an implication in there that we make money off of the back of it because it is all part of our kind of virtual items and all the rest of it, and that really couldn't be further from the truth, right? We ban over 5 million accounts across RuneScape and old school RuneScape each year for botting and for real world trading activity. As we say, we just took down 2 of the biggest kind of gold selling sites. It's a real kind of long-term effort. It takes a huge amount of kind of time to issue a cease and desist, for them to either accept that and reply or ignore it, and then you need to kind of escalate it and go through the legal process, going through the courts, which we do. And it's not only on kind of gold sellers, we're also engaged with a couple of police forces on potentially trying to take to court some prolific hijackers. But again, the whole thing is kind of linked in terms of kind of this black market of gold and account selling and all the rest of it. So there's a huge amount that we do. It's all behind the scenes. We can't kind of shout about it kind of too much. When we have a success like we did with Arca's Gold and Bulgar Gold, we will inform you, kind of the community, about it. But we do need you to know that actually we do spend a significant amount of time and a huge amount of money actually on trying to take this down. Again, with the ultimate aim of safeguarding our players and providing that positive gaming environment. Yeah,
and that's a start. That the initial 2 that have been...
Well, you say a start, but we've been trying to do it for over a year.
Yeah. So as in like publicly facing, that's a start. Yeah. And there are conversations happening behind closed doors.
Yeah, completely. And we also work with other organisations on that, not only kind of with our colleagues and people like the National Crimes Agency that I mentioned earlier, but also with UKI, the UK Games Industry representative body. We work very, very closely with them, and actually part of the successes we've had have been because of that collaboration that we have with them.
Okay, cool. And final part of this section, I'm going to touch on safeguarding, so under 18s. What do you define as safeguarding? Because my other half is a teacher. I kind of know it from a teaching point of view. From a gaming perspective or a games perspective, what does safeguarding look like?
Yeah, I it's a lot of the stuff that we kind of talked about earlier on in terms of kind of the chat monitoring, identifying kind of the potentials, the people that are using the RuneScape platform for nefarious kind of gain and activities, and being able to identify that and kind of take them out of our game. And like I say, it's something that we've been singled out as kind of best practice kind of for in the industry, and it's a big part of what we do. And we've got some really sophisticated systems around that, as well as members of our player support team whose focus is community safety.
All right, fantastic, Kevin. I think I'm going to turn around a little bit because I think we're moving on now to satisfying engagement, which is Mike's specialist subject.
Yeah.
So, in terms of satisfying engagement, what does that mean for you? Because again, it's a little bit of it's one of those terms which is perhaps a little bit nebulous. It can mean a lot of different things to different people. So, what from a Jagex perspective, what does that mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's about having content that's available to everybody. That doesn't mean that everybody can access everything straight away, but we want everybody to have sort of routes through the game that mean that it's fun and they enjoy it, and that they're not just sort of running out of runway and things to do and stuff like that. But it's also about being open and transparent with the way we design the game, and I think Mod Osborne talks about this a lot and is going to be talking about it a lot more in the new year. Sharing more stuff about what's coming up, things like archaeology, some of the stuff we've got planned for live ops and some of the events. And then about finding that balance of the right way for healthy play. So things like the double XP weekend with the extension that we put in for the last one. I think all of those things sort of combine to make the game. It's really about getting more value out of your membership.
Yeah, and I think again, whilst we're talking about this on a live stream now with kind of the three of us on the sofa, this is a conversation that happens within the entire Jagex office. This is something that we have a conversation with you guys at home as well. We want to try and make this as collaborative a process as possible. We want to try and define what that means in terms of satisfying engagement as I suppose not as a manifesto between us and the players, but kind of having that sense of actually you guys at home can come to us and say, actually, we're not happy with this, or we are really happy with this, and give us some constructive feedback on how we can improve.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, in terms of the open and transparent game design, what is the aim here? What is it that we're trying to do to I suppose, make more of a thing of being that transparent and being
Okay, because there's a lot of things that's going on here and a lot of things we're trying to achieve. So, we talked before about particularly things like the monetisation and treasure hunter. So, the RNG aspect of treasure hunter and loot boxes in particular is an area we want to tackle, and we wanted to really start making some progress about how we did that, which is why recently when we launched the Yak Track event, we did make a change on treasure hunter, which unintentionally turned out was a glass case, but the purpose of that was that you could see the rewards that you were getting from treasure hunter. So it's kind of taking away some of that blind choice, which is what a lot of people are concerned about. You see a box, you don't know what's in it, so you have to keep trying to get what you're after. So that was I'd say it's a first kind of experiment into this area to see how players reacted to it. How well it did compared to other sorts of things that we've done with Treasure Hunter. And we're going to be looking to bring that back and change certain aspects of it, see what we can do to improve it. But this is only a very first early step. This is not by any means, where we see things heading in the longer term. But, we want to, again, just demonstrate that we weren't trying to run our sort of standard promotions on Treasure Hunter at the same time as introducing a new feature. Yeah. So I mean, from what I saw, players were thought it was a step in the right direction by being more transparent. So they had more kind of choice and control about the rewards they were getting. I think that's a good thing. So probably more on that to come.
Yeah, and I know in terms of the roadmap for the future, obviously we've kind of experimented with those two aspects towards the start of November. Was it start of November?
End of November.
End of November. Yeah. God, again, my dates are a nightmare at the moment. What is the plan kind of early in the new year to kind of keep experimenting with this kind of approach?
So I think that RNG aspect of Treasure Hunter. We're looking at there's a particular event coming up where we're trying to take that almost completely away, so it's all about the choice of rewards. So you'll see something in the first few weeks of January where say you'll use your daily keys, get a prize of a certain rarity, but you'll be able to see a number of different rewards to choose from. And I think that, again, it's much more open and transparent. So again, it's a test. We want to see how that's received and how it performs, and we'll use that to sort of guide where we go in the future. But we've got a whole number of these kind of experimental initiatives planned. I actually want to come back on with some of our new design team and share some of those designs sort of more openly, so we can sort of put them in front of you guys, to get some feedback before we launch them.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Gone Yak tracking event, can we expect to see that coming back?
Is that the yak track itself, or the
glass case?
Okay, so the glass case thing, yeah, we'll bring that back. I think in January, I think we've replaced the Wednesday every week with that glass case, so we can just try different things with it and see what works best. And I think that replaces what they were the Mysteria promotions that were running in the past. Okay. So they're gone for now.
Okay, cool. That's good news. So from glass case to yak track.
Yeah.
You mentioned the feedback so far has been pretty positive. I think I'd be comfortable saying that it was fairly positive reaction, particularly when we launched. I think.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would perhaps? Sorry, I should probably start this on the positive side of things. What are you happy with yak track?
Well, I'm really happy with a number of things, but not least, shout out to the Valkyries team who put all that together incredibly quickly and did a really good job on it. So, I think they did really, first class job with not only, the rewards and the cosmetics, but the UI and the tasks and all of that stuff that went into it. So, they worked really hard to get that together. But also, from where we were when we tried this a year ago with the Rune Pass thing, which didn't work quite so well, I think
that's a bit of an understatement.
Yeah. It was, we didn't spend enough time in it, but more importantly, it didn't create the right amount of value. And I think that was one of the things I was pleased to see, that players didn't feel like this was, squeezing them. It was, a good price to get access to all those rewards, and even if you wanted to skip them, then it didn't feel unfair. And I think I was quite pleased with that. I think we are planning to bring this event back, so it'll be a regular feature next year.
How many times are we looking to do it?
I'd like to say we're going to do it 4 times next year.
Okay.
And if they're running for kind of the same kind of period, which seems to be about right, like the 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And again, it gives people enough kind of breathing room to do it without feeling super pressured. I will acknowledge the fact that some of those tasks are a little bit on the grindy side, or maybe extremely. So we are working on smoothing that out and improving, just ironing out the kinks in there. So, expect to see sort of more of the kind of fun stuff to kind of make it slightly less janky, maybe. Yeah. But yeah, so if they're running for 6 weeks, then it'll probably be kind of 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off, that kind of period. Okay.
And obviously this one was very generous, this pass. Will we expect to see with the future iterations of Yak Track for it to be as rewarding for players?
At least as rewarding.
At least as rewarding.
It's a really important point. I think when you look at the Battle Pass system and how it's run in lots of other games, it's all about the value and the generosity of that, of what you can get out of it. So our aim is to keep it at least a similar level. We might have different types of rewards in there. So instead of an emote, it might be a walk animation, or
thematic rewards as well. I think is probably, because obviously this one was, I'd say, probably Halloween focused.
It had a little bit of that.
Yeah. And obviously we've talked about perhaps how we would have liked to have got that out perhaps a little bit earlier. But yeah, I think having that kind of themed. Good for.
And also we need to look how, not only how it's themed throughout the year, but how it ties in with the rest of the content of the game.
Yeah.
I'm working quite closely with Mod Osborne and the episodic content team, just to see where, how can we bring those two things closer together. And it might even be, some of the tasks that you do will help you with other things. I think with the current one, we kind of launched it right alongside the farming and herb lore, which, in hindsight, maybe we needed a little bit of kind of space to allow people to sort of play in the way that they wanted to play, rather than feel obliged to do one thing or the other.
I mean, internally, the 25th of November was almost like, it was
a mega release.
Yeah, it was mega release. It was. I won't say panic stations for the CM team, but it was definitely. We definitely had an air of apprehension about how everything was going to go down. But it all went well, which is good.
Great.
So, do you see Yak Track as being the spiritual successor to Treasure Hunter?
No, not directly, and I think I sort of talked to this before. It's not intended as a replacement for those kind of daily rewards that you get from Treasure Hunter. I do, you know, we're very committed to finding something that works better than Treasure Hunter, which we're going to talk about a bit more. The yak track thing, I think it's part of the mix, and I think, you know, if we can prove sort of good engagement and good response from events like the yak track, then it reduces the need on the other side for, you know, continual Treasure Hunter promotions and things like that. So I think it's just sort of, you know, tips the balance a little bit the other way.
Yeah. Okay, and I have one more final question on kind of the stuff that we've, I suppose, done already.
Yeah.
Is around publishing Treasure Hunter drop rates.
Yeah.
Or chance rates.
So that started originally on mobile. So we put it in place on mobile first, but it's now the same on desktop as well. I think there was a blip on one of the advent calendar promotions where it kind of masked it. But the gem rarities from Treasure Hunter, the probabilities are openly visible on the interface.
And would that be the same for every promo moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, some of the promotions do tweak certain things, but what we need to get to is a way of, you know, just making those clear, whatever the mechanic is. So whether it's Treasure Hunter or what Treasure Hunter becomes, will be, you know, wherever possible, fully transparent about those rewards. Okay. I think there was a question as well about other types of reward in the game, not just Treasure Hunter. But
yeah, so in terms of, obviously that is just one of the elements of chance, I suppose, within the game. You've got things like pet drops, you've got things like boss drops. Are we looking to publish more of those kinds of drop rates as well?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we want to plaster the game with, you know, probabilities and drop tables all over the place, so maybe we have to find a sort of better home for it. We're looking at the moment at the mystery boxes that you get from certain types of events, so we'll make the contents of those a bit more clearly visible. So I think that's something, you know, we're doing not because we have to, but because we want to be more transparent across the board.
Okay, cool. And I know, so we've spoken a lot about Treasure Hunter, and we've spoken a lot about the future plans for Treasure Hunter. I know there was something in particular that you were really, really keen to talk about today, and I'm not going to try and steal thunder at all, but I don't know if it's worth just at this point.
Well, yeah, it's about, you know, what's our plans moving forward, and, you know, where do we want to get to. So one of the most important things, I think, and again, it's about transparency, it's about player choice. So we're working to remove all blind chance from Treasure Hunter rewards. We're looking at it at the moment. It's something I can't commit to an exact date on right now because lots of testing, etc., etc. But we're working on it in the first part of next year. So within the first quarter of next year, I'd expect to see that happen. And what I mean by that is we will address the fact that you can't see rewards, so that any reward you get from Treasure Hunter, there'll be a choice. That will happen for promos that are running, for the kind of standard Treasure Hunter. But I should be clear, this isn't the end point of this. It's not where we're trying to get to overall. It's just it's another step down that direction. Yeah, or maybe a 1.5. But it's taking us, you know, more into the realms of, you know, being completely open about it. I just wanted to be clear, it's not where this will end up. We're looking at a range of features, and we'll bring our kind of designer guy on to talk about that on a future stream. And when it may be that we change them up, say every few months. It may be that Treasure Hunter becomes different things that match better into the main game. Okay.
So if I'm a player and I'm going into the Treasure Hunter interface, I use a key. What does that then look like for a player, or what will that look like for a player under this?
So the changes we're looking at right now will mean that the prize claim interface, where you see the reward you get from a certain category and type, will present a choice, probably a choice of 3. So you'll be able to clearly see what those are and choose the one that you want.
Okay, cool. Does this mean that we'll... I'm sorry, I've wrote this question down. I can't remember what I was. So does this mean we will never ever see the existing RNG in Treasure Hunter? Is this something that, as I say, we're going to try and stamp out in the future? Say maybe looking a year, 2 years down the line, or however long we feel like it might take. Is that the eventual aim?
I want to make a system in the game that players are more comfortable with, where it's not a point of friction. I want players to feel that they have more choice and control. They're getting good value, and ultimately, it speaks to the freedom of choice and the healthier sort of style of gameplay. So those are the things we aspirationally definitely want to achieve. We're going to be making lots of changes throughout 2020. Like I said, we'll come back on and share some of those designs openly, and you'll see more and more of those new features and experiments being tried out in the first sort of part of next year.
Okay. And you touched on communication. I think that's a really important part. We've been historically quite quiet, particularly on the subject of monetisation. And
yeah, I mean, we talked about this a bit last time, didn't we? I think it's not because we wanted to hide away from it. It's more that we just didn't feel we'd made enough progress. And there's lots of reasons behind that. I think Mod Warden spoke to it a bit last time. But we've given more focus to the team to allow for that innovation and creativity. So things like design resources, testing and things like that will help the team sort of push that forward and kind of accelerate that pace of change. So I think it puts us in a better position. So I'm really happy to see that happening, and hopefully it's going to take us in the for a much better future for the game. Yeah,
and I think what's important to know is obviously that's the live events team. That's one of 3 teams within the RuneScape development team.
The live ops team.
Sorry, live ops even. And we've got live ops, we've got core game experience, and we've got the episodic content team. And we'd like to be similarly transparent and providing as much information to you guys at home as we possibly can do. I know that we're looking to do quite a lot of content around, say, archaeology in the new year as well, to talk about how we want to be, how you guys can enjoy the content, because I know it's a little bit still, we revealed it at RuneFest, there's not really been that much information since. We'd love to be able to get that information out to you as soon as we possibly can do. But again, we'd love to talk about, say, player support as well, and the feedback that we're getting from players on that, as well as also monetisation, many other things. There was a point probably about 2 years ago where we were really struggling to find live stream topics weekly. I feel like right now we don't have any, we have all manner of things that we can talk about, which is great. And
I think, again, Mod Warden, were he here, would love to talk more about what things are looking like for next year, because there's some really exciting things coming up, all sorts of things happening. You see some of the teams that Mod Hypnos has put out recently, like Smooth Movement.
I completely forgot to mention Smooth Movement in this script. Smoothment. And I think that's a really important thing to note as well, is that when it's not just the game content at the moment, I suppose, not just the new things that you can go and try. We're actually looking to modernise the way that you play the game as a whole. And I've seen lots of positive feedback from Smoothment, as we're going to call it from now on. And I think that is a real mark of intent for what that team is looking like they're going to be doing in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just regards to next week's live stream, we haven't quite confirmed what we wanted to do yet. But I'm sure Mod Warden will want to make an appearance on that as well, because he wasn't able to do today.
Let's put him down for that one.
I'll definitely put him down for that one. Okay, so content available to everybody. You mentioned that at the start. We're talking a little bit about, we've mentioned on the monetisation live stream about kind of centralisation of currencies, and that particularly for new players, but I know for a lot of kind of lapsed players and players that are even current players. The current way that it works can be a little bit confusing. It's not necessarily the most intuitive way of being able to work the currency system, and it's also, I suppose, people having to pay for lots of different types of currencies for different types of outputs, whether it be like a legendary pet in the Solomon store, or something like the oddment system. What are we doing to try and address that?
So, we're definitely looking at this really closely. This is something that's probably going to take a little bit longer and we need to be quite careful about how we design it so it works for everybody. Ultimately though, I would like to see it much simpler. So bring all these things together that are quite disparate. You've got, Solomon's store out on the website, you've got Treasure Hunter, you've got different ways of redeeming bonds. Loyalty points. All of these things, we need to simplify, unify it together, probably in a simpler kind of user interface. So we're working on plans for that, which will probably come sort of later on in next year. And again, as soon as I'm able to, I'll come on and share some designs and what we're planning to do there. But these things shouldn't be complicated and get in the way of the enjoyment of the game. So, yeah.
When you come back on, I fully expect the Christmas jumper to still be on.
I'll probably get a new one for Christmas.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how hot currently are you?
I'm all right. I'm okay.
Okay.
I think I'm sweating less than I was on the last time I was on.
Well, that's good. That's good. I'm going to touch on kind of healthy play now. We've kind of alluded to it a couple of times already in the live stream, but we wanted to talk specifically about the double XP, extended double XP weekend.
It's an old man jumper. So 1970s.
Is that 1970?
No, Star Wars.
Oh, okay, 1970. Okay, I was going to say
the jumper's not from 1970.
Yeah. We were talking about double XP weekend, the extended double XP weekend, which was a conscious decision that we made to try and perhaps improve the gaming experience for players over the course of the double XP weekend, because we know that there are lots of memes of people saying, I'm going to be staying on my desk for the next 3 days, and we don't really want to try and encourage that behaviour.
And the whole, XP waste thing, and we wanted to try and change this for a while now, because it's one of these areas that's got a little bit sore over time. People are like, is it the right thing to do? So we basically looked at how can we rebalance the double XP weekend so players don't feel that it's not rewarding, so you can still get as much out of it, but at the same time you don't feel as obliged to stay chained in front of your computer or even to your mobile. The plan was that we would make an allotted quota of double XP that everybody gets, and they have an extension period of 7 days beyond the normal double XP.
Yeah, so 10 days total.
So 10 days in total. There was a lot of questions at the time about, why 36 hours, why not 48 hours or 24 hours? We did look at the data around, on average, in a typical double XP weekend, how many players are using up all of that time, and it's a very, very small amount.
About 10%, wasn't it? Or maybe
no, it was less than 1%.
Less than 1%?
On a standard double XP weekend. We said we'd do it at 36 and see how we got on with that. Again, I think the reception of that seemed to be very, very positive.
Yep, I would agree with that.
So, and I did want to share some of the results of that.
Yep.
So,
go ahead. You've got the clicker.
We've even got a slide.
I was looking for the clicker and I was like, oh god. The one thing that I had to look after that Rod John gave me, and I thought I'd lost it, but it looks like Mick's got it. So this is there are transitions, I believe. So click through.
You can call that a transition. So how did everybody get on with the 36 hours? So, it turned out that 11% of players used the full 36 hours of double XP. So I don't know whether that surprised you or not.
That's probably where I've got the 10% from.
Yeah, I kind of expected it to be maybe higher. Of that, or 47% used more than 18 hours, so more than half of that allowance, which I think, so it gives you an idea. And then if you follow this graph through, this is the
emphasis on if you can follow this graph. But
Jodie and I were looking at this earlier going, right, we'll figure that one out.
There is a lot of data to gather from 10 days worth of experience across the game. Yeah. What these colour bars show is the proportion of players that used up either 10, 20, 30, 40, etc., all the way to 100%. So the white bit at the top is players that maxed out the whole 100% of that double XP. And you can see that really starts to grow after the end of the weekend. There's the little dotted line there. So after the first 3 days, that's when more players were who did max it out actually did so, which to me is a good sign, because it means they were taking advantage of that extension period, even running it through into the second weekend. Also, the other interesting point from this is that those kind of channels are fairly evenly spread out.
Yeah, I was going to say that
it's
actually.
Not, if it was everybody or large proportion of players had used up, the whole 100%, then maybe the balancing wasn't quite right. If those are kind of even, that tells me I think we got it pretty, as close to spot on as we could, I think.
Yeah.
Just a few kind of factoids. The top 3 skills being trained there: Herblore.
Unsurprising, I think, with the 120s.
Summoning, which was a bit more interesting, and Invention. The numbers there obviously are astronomical. 244 trillion XP were gained over those 10 days. But probably the more interesting point is the percentage difference over the last double XP weekend, which is in July. So although those figures are higher, summoning only up by 6% over a 10-day period versus a 2-day period. So per day, you can see it's not that it's injecting an enormous amount more XP into the game. And if players are comfortable with that as a model moving forwards, then I think it's definitely worth repeating.
Yeah.
And a little high score table of some of the XP gained by players. There were, of course, some players that did take advantage and
So is that somebody got nearly 200 mil XP over the course of that weekend?
10 days, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
You could be gutted because you didn't actually reach 200 mil. That is so close to 200 mil.
Yeah.
Wow.
I could tell you who it was and how long it took them, but I think I'd be breaching GDPR, so I won't. No, I can't tell you that.
Wow. Okay.
But yeah, so that was the double XP weekend. So in general, if people like that, I think we'll look to repeat that next year. We can change up the amount and the timings if people think that works better, but I think we're pretty close to it. So
yeah, I mean, just on the timing thing, would we do that again with, say, the big launch of a huge content update? I think the week prior.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, like I said, it probably needs a bit of space around it so that it doesn't detract from what people really want to be playing. So we'll just make sure we're sort of synced up on the calendars.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to touch on. So I've got some questions from the chat. Question, Kelvin. Just to reiterate again, how can players reach out to Jagex about their spending?
Well, I mean, there's generally kind of contact routes through the support centre to contact us. Like I said, we're going to be kind of experimenting with sort of proactively reaching out to players, and that will kind of have a link in there as well. But people can go through the support centre and go through kind of the payment kind of option.
Yeah,
I would suggest.
Okay, there's a few questions around spending caps and whatnot. So are we able to elaborate on the factors that go into deciding if we were to, say, have that trigger?
Well, I mean, I think you've got kind of total spend, and then you've got a change in spending behaviour. What we are doing is we're kind of looking at that and sort of experimenting with it. So we've not got a kind of hard and fast kind of rules right now because it's the first time we've done it. We want to kind of have a look, see what works, make sure that we've got enough staff to kind of deal with kind of all of that kind of properly. And I think the focus is on doing it right, starting small, and then kind of building on that, so we know that what we're doing is absolutely the best that we can possibly make it.
Okay, and if, because we know that there are instances of players having multiple accounts, if we were able to, say, identify via an IP, for instance, that a particular account was spending a lot of money over a big group of accounts, is that something that we could track, or...?
It's kind of not straightforward because I mean our account system is based on kind of the account level, right, and doesn't necessarily kind of link them together. Where we can, I'm not going to kind of go into the details of that, but where we can kind of link them together, we do, but also in a lot of cases that sort of we can't. I mean, we have thought about that, and we do want to avoid a situation where we're sending kind of multiple messages to kind of the same person, but again, because everything is kind of on an account level and people own multiple accounts, that potentially kind of could happen. But again, that's part of what we're trying to kind of understand in doing this for the first time ourselves.
Okay, cool. I think from my perspective, there's one more question. So in terms of toxicity, we talked about banning accounts and whatnot. What is there to stop somebody from coming back into game and doing exactly the same thing again with a different account?
Well, with a brand new account, yeah, I mean, again, we apply bans on the account level. It's very difficult to ban IPs and kind of all the rest of it because they could be used by a university or a library and all the rest of it. And, we don't want to kind of freeze out any kind of genuine players through that process. And generally what we do say is people can kind of learn from their lessons. If we do kind of ban one account, we genuinely say, you're free to create another account as long as you abide by the rules of RuneScape. And that's what we're asking our players to do.
Okay, cool. I'm sure there'll be lots of other questions that will come out of this chat. I'm sure, I've noticed Rubik is in the chat, and I'm sure that he will come up with an excellent TLDW, which we'll be looking at over the course of the next few hours. So if you've got any other questions, please feel free to either put it on Reddit or to contact one of us directly. So we're all on Twitter. Are you on Twitter, Kelvin?
I'm on Twitter.
Yeah, so Jagex Kelvin, Jagex MIC, Jagex JD, and we'll try and...
Before you go, can I sort of just jump in and sort of say something? So I think just really important kind of on all of this stuff to realise we're doing it because we think it's the right thing to do as a game, right? In terms of whether it's kind of duty of care, the freedom of choice stuff, providing that safe gaming environment and providing satisfying engagement. You know, these are principles that are governing our thinking, our decisions, and all the rest of it. And it's us doing that, and it's really important that we do that because, you know, ultimately we're doing it to provide the best possible gaming environment that we can for our players. And it really is kind of from our hearts. You know, I've been here at this company for nearly 15 years, and you know, I strive to do the best that I possibly can, kind of every single day. And this is absolutely a part of that.
Yeah, and so in terms,
Well
I mean, I've been nearly 6, so I can't really compare to that, unfortunately. But same sentiment.
I'm a mere 5.
Same sentiment. But no, in terms of the next steps, obviously you've seen some of the stuff that we've already done. And that we will be continuing to kind of iterate on, and hopefully you'll be starting to see some of this, some of the stuff that we've mentioned that's perhaps more all-encompassing being rolled out in the next few months. There are a few things that will probably take a little bit longer than that, but the aim for this is to try and keep this discussion going. We're not going to go silent. We're not going to. Obviously, we did the monetisation live stream in November. I think I've got that date right, and we've come back in December to talk to you about. Again, slightly more all-encompassing issues, but obviously talking about monetisation as well. So we want to try and make this more of a dialogue between us and you. And so we would love to bring some of these guys back onto the sofas to update you on progress in the coming weeks after Christmas.
Cool.
So
very happy to do that.
And the thing is, he actually sounds like he means it as well, which is great.
I love it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So that's. We've got a live stream next week as well, so if there is anything that really crops up over the next few days, there is a real burning desire to answer these questions, then we could perhaps deal with that again next week as well. Okay. So fantastic! Thank you very much to Kelvin. Thank you very much to
Thanks for having us on.
And we will be back next week. It will be myself hosting again because everybody else is off on their holidays. Lucky sods. But thank you very much to everyone for watching. We hope you found this useful. Have a really lovely evening.
Is it too early to say Merry Christmas to people?
Let's say it. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
I don't speak to you before. There we go.
Good.